pod of orcas were found stuck in ice just off the coast of Japan last week, and they have disappeared. So people are assuming that they got freed. But the question is, did they actually remain free? We're going to talk about it on today's episode of Ocean Talk. Let's start the show. Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of Ocean Talk. I'm your host, Andrew Lewin, and this is where I talk about all things oceans so that you can be more aware of what's happening in the ocean so you can live for a better ocean by taking action. On today's episode, we're going to be talking about the pod of orcas. About 13 individuals from that pod were found stuck in the ice just off of the coast of Hideko, Japan, and it made huge news. It was all over the news. There were basically these orca individuals were kind of bobbing up and down in the ice. It looked like they were trapped in a bunch of ice floes. So there were some loose pieces of ice, and then there was others like some big ice floats that are around them, they're surrounding them, and they didn't look like they can get at them. So a lot of people are asking me, Andrew, how did they get there? It's a great question. Orcas do not do well around ice. They're not known to really be around a lot of ice unless there's specific food that's there. Some researchers are thinking that because of climate change and the breakup of ice, there's more ice floats that are going around and maybe surrounding orcas that get close to the ice for hunting. But really there's no documented reasons of why these orcas are necessarily around here. I did read a couple of articles on this story, which I'll link in the description below, but obviously there's some concern about these orcas and what happened to them. Last Tuesday, the pod of orcas were discovered by drone footage for researchers who were doing some research around the area, saw the pod of whales and said, wait, hold on a second, what's going on here? They went back, they're in a pretty remote area, they went back, they came back late, about 6 hours later, they found them a little bit north of where they were. So the researchers were thinking, hey, maybe they're finding their way out of the ice float so that they're trying to navigate out there, so maybe they'll get out. Here's the problem with ice floats, they can close in pretty quickly, and these orcas need to get air fairly quickly. When you see an orca in the water, you don't really see it diving for 20 minutes like other bigger whales like baleen whales, where they'll dive for about 20 minutes and then come back up. A lot of orcas will just kind of dive in, dive out, and they'll just get air as they go along, and almost like, you know, when you see dolphins do like a bow ride. I've seen videos of orcas bow riding with ships where they're just kind of following the ship at the speed, either the back or the front, and they're just jumping along with it, racing the boats. They just love that kind of stuff, which is kind of scary for some people because it's these massive whales that are following your boat, but they do that anyway, and they tend to get a lot of air. They tend to get more air just by that motion. And so having ice floats where some whales can dive under the ice floats and then come back up away from the ice to get a breath, these orcas need air more, so they require to come up to the surface a lot faster and a lot more times. So having ice kind of close in on them, that could be a little dangerous, and you don't want that to happen. When the researchers saw the orcas 6 hours later and they were more north of where they were before, then the next time they came back, they disappeared. So a lot of articles came out and just presumed that these orcas were more north. They presumed that these orcas had escaped. But some researchers are thinking these orcas could have died. They could have drowned because they couldn't get up in time for air. And that's the big concern right now, is what happened to these orcas. Nobody really knows. Scientists think that they could have died because in 2019, there was a study of ice-trapped orcas that suggests that the mammals might live up to 50 days on body fat before starving to death during entrapment. There could be a reason that they stayed. Maybe it was just they weren't trapped long enough. We don't know how long they were trapped for, so we don't know if they were trapped for a number of different days or a number of hours before that. So we don't know the length of time that they were actually trapped in the ice. So they could have used up all of their body fat or a lot of their body fat. That puts them in a vulnerable situation if they're not getting food because they're just worried about breathing. And if you watch this video, you'll see that they're bobbing up and down. They look stressed because the amount of times they're bobbing up and down. They're really close together. Orcas don't usually stay that close. They're usually fairly well away from each other, and it looks like they're struggling. We don't know exactly what happened, and unfortunately that's where it ends. This story ends. We just can't find these orcas, and we don't know if they're hundreds and thousands of kilometers away. We don't know if they're just at the bottom of the ocean because they've passed away because they couldn't breathe, or they're too stressed, or they used up too much of their fatty storage. Unfortunately, this is the deal. And on my podcast, on the How to Protect the Ocean podcast, I did the same thing as a lot of these articles. I just presumed that they survived because I'm a bit of an optimist, but as a scientist, you have to think of everything, and they could have passed away. We don't know. Hopefully somebody will notice them in the area, notice the same amount of orcas, and hopefully these will be the orcas that have survived, but you just never know. And it just goes to show that you never know what happens in the ocean. But the concerning thing is how are these ice floats going to affect orcas in the future, or other whales in the future? We know orcas are susceptible to ice, getting caught in ice. Is this going to happen in the future? Because orcas tend to stay away from ice. But if they get trapped in ice, and maybe they think they can get through because there's a lot of different areas that they can navigate through, but then they get stuck and they can't get out, is this going to happen more often? Some researchers are thinking that climate change is causing more of these ice floats to separate, and so there's a lot more room within these floats, but they can close up pretty quickly. So are we going to see more entrapments of orcas in the ice? Or is it just that the fact that this is just more reported now? This just happened. This drone footage just happened to see these orcas. Is it just that humans are in the ice more and we're seeing more of these orcas being trapped, and maybe this is a common occurrence? We just don't know. But researchers are trying to study that, and hopefully we'll find out the answer soon. So that's it for today's episode. If you want to hear more details about ocean news, ocean science, ocean conservation, feel free to click the link below to my audio podcast called How to Protect the Ocean. It's free to subscribe. You can share it with friends. And of course, don't forget to subscribe and click that notification bell for this channel, because I update you on the news every Tuesdays and Thursdays, and I'll be posting up some interviews this week on past interviews that I've done on the How to Protect the Ocean. I've got some video of those. I want to share them with you so you can just kind of chill out on here and you can enjoy the interviews. So thank you very much for joining me on today's episode of Ocean Talk. I'm your host, Andrew Lewin. Have a great day. We'll talk to you next time, and happy conservation.